I am not recording you, I'm recording myself since all the microphones are muted. I do hear some background noise and I don't think it's from me, so maybe there's a microphone that's not muted. I ask you that you sign on from a computer or laptop or smartphone, that you are muted on your end and you can see my screen and hear me. That way we don't hear the background noise from everybody present. It's hard to control all the microphones, and occasionally we open up for questions, but we need to take turns, or we can use the chat and you post the question and I read it and I answer. And as I said, I'm leaving time at the end for the questions, and I'm recording this to keep for myself and also to share with a couple of people that could not make it but are interested in finding out about this. I am also holding a new session next week. I closed the registration yesterday when I saw there were 72, and I can only invite so many. So there will be a second opportunity next week if if you know somebody that missed it and you want to suggest that. I appreciate that. So let's get started with our topic. I see that you can hear me and you can see my screen. I confirmed that with the people that arrived earlier. Just note the chat. I would like you to use it for questions. If there are technical issues, I really cannot resolve it as I'm doing the presentation. I confirm that my settings are working in the beginning. Sometimes people have problems on their end, and it's hard for me to do the technical support on my end. I don't know how your settings work, and I don't have the means to help you in that case. So in that case, if something like that happens, if for some reason you can't hear, be assured that there's a recording and I can share that with you later. Check your settings, check your mic, not your mic, sorry, your volume. You will not be speaking. And if you can't see my presentation, that's okay too, because really I'm going to be mentioning everything that's on the slides, and this is more like a guide for me to guide my conversation. Okay, let me read a couple of things in the chat. Okay, thanks for the webinar, nothing urgent. Okay, so let's get started with our topic. So the topic today is remote interpreting and ways and means in which we can do this. Why I chose this is because I've been interested in this subject for a while, but now because of the situation with the pandemic and the fact that I have more time available and the fact that I need to work more, I had the time and the luxury to explore this in more detail, and thanks to some of my colleagues that also hosted some webinars, a lot of them free, some for very little. I started to delve into this a little bit more, and trying to explore how I can work more from home during the time of the pandemic. And I have been doing some remote interpretation over the phone for many, many years, more than 15. Um, I have been teaching online, so I'm familiar with the platform like this one, GoToMeeting, and a couple other platforms. And when this happened, I said, well, let me see if I can use this platform to do what I do in court, to interpret as I do in court. And I explore, and no, this is not the best platform, but there are other ways. And so I attended a lot of webinars, and I studied the subject a little bit, and I wanted to share that with you. And I like to exchange ideas as well. So Is it possible to do remote interpreting? Is it the same as in person? Well, it's not really the same, but yes, it is possible. So, what type of interpreting do we have? Interpreting types, interpreting settings, they vary. And of course, for each setting, there's a different way of handling it. So, say community interpreting. We do medical, social work, etc. Been doing this for a long time. And this is nothing new. You can do remote interpreting in these settings, although many people prefer on-site, of course. Court interpreting, court hearings, trials, civil, criminal cases, traffic, anything court related, depositions, jail visits, trial preparation, witnesses interviews, social services evaluations, psychological evaluations, some of the settings that are related to court interpreting, and which I do most of the time. I'm a court interpreter. I work mostly in federal court, but I've worked in state court as well, and I have worked in court for 20 years. And another setting is the conference setting. So you can do meetings, international meetings, business meetings. The topics may vary, science, whatever the topic is, basically meetings where you would work in a booth and interpret simultaneously into one language or into two if you go both directions. So these are the different settings in which most of us work. I understand that most people here today are interpreters. I invited all my interpreters, friends and colleagues and people I have on my mailing list, and some people share the invitation as well. Maybe some people are not interpreters but are users of interpreting services and are interested in the subject as well, and they're also welcome. I understand that everybody has a different experience, and people have been exploring different ways of interpreting, both in person and somewhat remote, some people. So the types of modes that we use in interpretation: consecutive interpretation, of course, we do that for community interpreting and for court interpreting. Simultaneous interpretation, of course, court interpreting to community sometimes, and conferences, of course, and site interpretation. So these are the three modes in which we have to be proficient if we want to pass the test, mostly for court interpreting and community interpreting. For conferences, most people don't do consecutive, they do simultaneous, but you have to be able to do both. So these are the three modes, and we all should be familiar with this. I will not go into that. So consecutive, you go from one language into another, and I put here English into Spanish because that's the pair I work in, and Spanish into English. That's what I do. But you can substitute that for whatever language. So English into foreign language, or foreign language into foreign language. Because I'm based in the US and my practice and most people that are attending are in the US, usually the requirement is that English is one of your languages and you're going to go into English or into foreign language one way and the other way as well. For conference interpreting, the usual denomination is language A, language B, language C. So English and foreign language doesn't sound very good when you are interpreting in a multilingual conference where not everybody speaks English. So, but the ones in the US, most people do. So, usually the requirements that you do English and the other language is called foreign language. But you call it whatever you want, your A language into your B language, your B into your A language, your C language into your A language. Whatever direction you interpret, we're going to interpret consecutively, simultaneously, or site interpretation. And that's what we normally do in person. of what we have been doing in person. But now with the pandemic, there's very little work in person. So these are the situations, different settings, and different platforms that we can use to work remote. The first one is called OPI, and most people are familiar with that, or telephonic interpretation or over the phone interpretation. This has been around for quite a while, and a lot of the community interpreting can be done over the phone, and it actually is done a lot over the phone. Of course, there's a situation for everything, but you can do medical, social work, etc. over the phone. So this one is not new. It's been around for a while. There's a second mode that is similar. It's called VRI. It uses video. Usually, it's the same methodology basically that OPR, but this was developed mainly for the ASL interpreters. Now it's used for other languages as well. Of course, spoken interpreters do not need to be on the screen, but it's a modality that's used in many hospitals and many situations now. So VRI or OPR are not new and are in use in practically all of the country and abroad. The third mode of remote interpretation is remote simultaneous interpretation. And this is the one that's the newest and the most advanced in the sense that you need more equipment and you need the skill to be able to do simultaneously, of course. But if you're a conference interpreter, so you have the skill, you work simultaneously, you work in conferences, you can do it remotely as well now, because there is the technology that allows for that. This is relatively new, not very new, but now it seems to be more in vogue because people are looking for different ways to deliver the service in lieu of services in person that are not being scheduled these days. So, can we do all this remotely? Of course we can. Just like you couldn't think that you'd be using email some years ago, many years ago. We could communicate only via snail mail, and now most of the communications is via email in writing, and still we have the old mail system. So we can still do both. We can use one or the other depending on the situation and depending on what we need. So yes, we can do it. How we can do it? We can do it with the technology. So it means we need to adapt a little bit to use the technology. We need to adapt to the circumstances. So why is it good to adapt to the use of technology that some people resist? I am not one of them. I know in person is better most of the time, but there are situations when technology helps, makes things better, helps in delivering the job. It's also a question of survival. Sometimes, like in these days, people cannot deliver the service in person because it is not allowed in many situations. Places are closed. Courts are only having very urgent hearings, and they're also doing it remote. I just started doing it for federal court because they didn't want to do it, but they finally had to because there are situations where there are hearings that have to take place. So everything that was scheduled on my calendar for this month and even next month and even into June, I had trials scheduled for April for 8 weeks, June for 9 weeks. Well, all that has been cancelled. And all of the hearings, most of the hearings, except that there's detention hearings, there's initial appearances. People are detained and they need to go see the judge. And so there is one judge on duty They don't want people in person. There's a problem with the transportation of the detainees too. They are transported, but we don't want them, in the same room or small room in an interview room. So we have been doing this remote. So, but this is something that just happened very recently. I just had the first remote hearings with the federal court virtually this month. Before that, I did a lot of hearings for court, for workers' compensation, for immigration, for traffic, but it was over the phone. Now they're starting to use the video conference. So why do we want to adapt? Well, sometimes because we want to improve, sometimes because we need to for survival. Um, Adapting doesn't mean we have to discard the old ways. The old way is proven and will continue to be useful. Just that at this moment, apparently, we don't really have much of an option. So let's try to do it. Let's try to adapt and see how we can do it. So we mentioned consecutive. Consecutive can be done over the phone and is done, has been done forever. Sight interpretation. Sight interpretation can be done remotely too. And actually, many of the platforms that are used nowadays allow for exchange via chat or email, or posting documents, or sharing the screen, or you can share a link and receive the documentation. Because we prefer not to do sight interpretation when we don't have to do it remote, but we need to be able to receive documents. We need to be able to see documents, because we may be called upon to interpret a situation where there is a document presented in writing. It may be a statement of a victim that appears for a TPO, for a temporary protective order, and he or she writes a statement to get a first hearing into the court. And that has to be read and interpreted so that they can decide, they can pass that on to the judge, and the judge can use that as evidence in the first hearing to determine if the person deserves or not a temporary protective order. So there is no time to have this sent out and translated sometimes. So it may be that the person presents it at the hearing and we're called upon to interpret uh, in sight mode, just like we would do in person. We take a few minutes to read it over and deliver it. So if we're doing it remote, it would be the same thing. We would need the document that needs to be facilitated by email or posted on the platform if the platform allows for uploading documents, or we need to receive a link, preferably before the hearing. But things happen where people submit the evidence or are asked to submit while at the hearing, particularly in emergency situations. So the platform should allow for that, or we should find a way to be able to access the documents as well. So what about remote simultaneous interpretation? Well, in that case, we need a little bit more from the technology point of view. We need platforms that are useful for this mode. Not all the platforms adapt to remote simultaneous. And I have to tell you that the hearings that I did for federal court recently, I had to do consecutive. Normally, in the courtroom, I would do most of it simultaneously, but because of the platform that the courts are using, they were not prepared for this, and they don't have use of the remote simultaneous platforms. So I have to work with whatever platform my client proposes. In this case, the court is set up to do conference meetings, just like a go-to meeting like I'm using now. I could not do simultaneous with that, not that I know of. I tried, but there are platforms that allow for that. So you need to be a little bit more prepared to do remote simultaneous, you have to have the technology available, both on your side as the interpreter, and also the client has to be, of course, on the same platform and know how to use it. So it's going to be a while till this is implemented in the core system, I think, from my experience. I have not seen this used in the core system yet. So my experience recently with doing remote interpreting for the courts in conference platforms is with video, although I do not appear in video, but the attorneys, the judge, the defendant do appear in video. I prefer not to be on the camera and just be the voice. I could be on the camera as well. This is set up by the court. It's set up from the clerk's office, and so you have different people appearing like they would in person, but they're working from some from their office, most from their homes at this time. It's a problem because this is new and not everybody has the technology that's required. So we need to be prepared. As interpreters, we should try to avail ourselves of the means to be able to do it. So this is a platform they have and they chose, not the platform I chose, the platform my client, the courts, chose. So they set it up, they send me the links, it's going to be virtual, I don't know how it's going to work, they tell me, and they are all very scared of this. I am not so scared because I was prepared, I practiced, I had experience doing consecutive on the phone for like 15 years and teaching online, so I'm familiar with the platforms. But for most people, this is not something they've done before, and they think it's just the same as picking up the phone, but it's not. And even for over the phone interpreting, yes, you need a phone, but you need a good phone with a good connection. You need headsets. Some people put you on speaker, and yeah, the speaker is great if the sound is great and there's no background noise. But, if you have to interpret with bad sound, with background noise, it's not good. It's not easy. So what happens these days, like in this meeting I just had with the courts, we had, five detention hearings and initial appearances in the past week. The first one, the prosecutor could not log on. Has a problem with technologies. An older guy was all conflicted, didn't know what to do, called me the day before to send me documents, was all worried that it was not going to work. Well, it worked for everybody but for him. Problem at his end. However, the courtroom clerk managed to communicate with him, have him hang up, call him separately, had him call over the phone. So we started a little bit late with the hearing with everybody present. I started early with one of the attorneys that had to interview the defendant and introduce himself for the first time. So the court was prepared. The defense attorney was prepared, but he was new to this. The defendant was in the lockup, so the marshal set up a little device like an iPad, I suppose, on a stand like they do in the hospitals. Well, when we started with the conversation that was private between the attorney, the interpreter, and the defendant, he was in the lockup in the marshal's office. We could only see from his mask down. So I couldn't see his face. He was wearing a mask, but we could communicate. By the time the prosecutor came and the judge, they adjusted the view. Okay, so we could hear and he was in full view. Then we had problem with the prosecutor that could not log on. Well, then he logged on from a telephone. It worked out, but it took some adjustment. It took adjustment from most of the people involved. For the court that was setting it up, that was the first time, to have everybody on the screen as they should be, to have the microphones working, to have everybody that needed to be present via phone or computer. Finally, we did it. It took a little longer. The sound worked fine. And we were able to do this detention hearing, and this person actually was released on conditions. So the only way that that could have been done in this time was remote. Yes, it took a little longer, it took some adaptation, but it worked. Next time they set up 3, not 1, all in the same day. It was all prepared. It worked out better, or so we thought, except one of the attorneys. She appeared sideways on the screen. She didn't have a phone that had good sound, so it sounded like a speaker with a lot of noise in the background. Um, it was very hard. She was breaking up all the time. And at one moment, she went out to look for some headphones. She didn't have them. Second time she appeared, she was prepared. So this is the question. It can be done. We just need to have the elements we need to have. And we also need to tell our clients what we need and try to educate the clients just like we have to educate the clients in whatever we do, translation, interpretation, use of equipment, and what we need. So this is something new, and it's new for most people. So I wanted to show you what is it we need. I started to find this out and setting up a home studio. Almost ready. I was ready for the court hearings because it was consecutive. If I have to do the RSI, I'm sort of ready, but I still need one more cable. So what do we need? We need more than a phone if we want to do remote simultaneous. We need a good phone. We need headsets. Without the headset, the sound is not really good. We need more than one screen. We need a screen to receive the feed like we do from the floor in a conference, but we also need our screen to work with, to look up words, to use as reference. So the requirement is to have a good computer where you can have good resources and good communication, but also a monitor that you can have a second screen. Good connection, email, cloud storage, and very good speeds on the internet. There are some, if you're interested in setting up your home studio, of course, the best is to be in a professional studio. But as I said, in these times, you could set up your studio. You just have to comply with some of the requirements, or all of the requirements. So you can find more about this, and I'll give you some ideas later. So let's go on to what we're actually doing now, and it's readily available and should be done since the resources exist now and most people could do this. Like I said, the consecutive interpretation, any platform, it could be the free platforms, it could be Zoom, you can accommodate for this kind of interpretation. Witness on the stand, hopefully not very long, but like I say, if there is a short hearing for a temporary protective order, a person may have to take the stand and the testimony has to be heard so that the person can be granted or denied the order. That cannot wait till the end of the pandemic. The person may not be alive by then. The defendant as a witness also, a person is detained and may may be given testimony also in an attempt to to set up conditions of release or bail reviews, interrogation of a defendant or interviews with the attorney, the advice of rights, the qualification of the defendant. Depositions are being done virtually these days as well. And if you work with some of the companies that do depositions, I keep receiving emails from one of them in particular that is really pushing the virtual depositions because it's either that or not having depositions at all at this time. So they are set up for that. Not everybody, but there are companies out there, very reputable companies, that are already doing this. And they are taking the record also virtually. So actually they are, I don't know of anybody that has done a deposition interpreted virtually, but I know the depositions are being carried out virtually and they're taking the records virtually. So the court reporters are appearing remote, and so can the interpreters for that matter. So I would offer that. I would volunteer to do it. If I'm called to do it, I am ready to do that. And anything that is work related with the court that usually happens outside the court, in preparation for a court appearance, all of that can be done remotely. Interviews of witnesses, etc. And I suspect that although this is the only possibility to do these things now is virtually, this is going to be here to stay. There are going to be situations, just like with telephonic interpretation, where interpreters are too far away, or they're interpreters of different languages that are not very common, of lesser diffusion, where it's very hard to get the interpreter on site, where they're going to resort to the on-site. And also many situations where they're going to do it to try to save money or time. Now, let's hope they don't try to save money with our services, because it's a question that often comes up. So is it cheaper because it's remote? No, there's no reason why it should be cheaper. It's cheaper because you don't have to travel. They can save money on interpreter travel, on parking, on mileage, on flying, on hotels. So that is a big savings already, whatever mode of interpretation you work in. Now, as far as our fees, I do not for a minute think that we should charge less because we're working remote, because we are offering our same qualifications, our same expertise as when we do it on site, our same certifications, plus we have to adapt to the technology and we have to provide the technology on many occasions. So why would we charge less? If anything, we should charge more. And it's also more difficult, although people don't see it that way, because you have the added problem of the fact that you may be very well equipped with your equipment and have perfect sound and a perfectly quiet environment and all the resources that you need to deliver your job. But the persons that you're interpreting for may be on a speakerphone or in a noisy environment, or not speaking close to the mic. There are many situations that make it more difficult, like the one I just explained with this attorney this week. So it takes the adaptation. It is a little bit more difficult. There's sometimes more distraction, because when you're interpreting on site, uh, you're concentrating on the thing at hand. When you are on your computer, you may have other things going on around. You may have somebody calling you at the same time. Of course, you're going to turn down that phone, that volume, or put it on silent. But somebody that's on the call may have the phone on on vibrator, or may have it with sound, or they may have people around talking, like when you receive calls from, say, the jail or so, or some office where there's a lot of people around. So the conditions are not the same. It's not the same as when you are in a booth. You may recreate your booth at home, but as far as what you're receiving, you have very little control on that. And what I suggest is, before we accept an assignment, try to figure out what are the conditions going to be, what platform is going to be used. Are you familiar with the platform? Is the client familiar with the platform? You may be offering the platform, but you have to know that the client knows how to work with it. So we're not going to be trying it the same day. So there's a lot of preparation that has to be done and adaptation. So as far as the adaptation, our part, and the preparation, this is what I wanted to do this webinar for, to, try to help you get ready, like I'm getting ready for this. But there are a lot of things that are going to be out of our control. So I went into this, as far as the difficulty, it is a little bit more difficult. And you also have, like I said, some distractions. I'm doing this webinar now, and I said, okay, everybody's on mute. We have the chat enabled. And I ask that you don't use the chat for technical issues that I can't resolve. But, I've done many webinars where initially people may have a problem at their end with the computer, and if there's two or three, I may suggest a couple of things. Well, try refresh, try this, try that, but really I don't know what's going on the other side, and I cannot be the technician. And if I am going to do that, that's going to distract from my interpretation, from my presentation, etc. So when you're doing RSI, just like when you are doing on-site conference interpretation, there's a technician. The technician deals with the technical issue. When you're doing it from your home studio, and if it's not a conference set up with one of these wonderful platforms that are prepared for this, then you are going to do the technical part as well as interpreting, as well as handling the chat. That's way too much. But, those are some of the distractions and interruptions that come along with working alone, working from home, and working alone. Speaking of working alone, for simultaneous, we do not work alone. We work in teams, even if you're not in the same place. We can talk about that a little bit later. But I assume most of us work in court, and we can talk about conference a little bit later or on another occasion. So the examples of consecutive interpretation that can be done remotely and are being done now, mostly, as I said, correlated. These are some of the examples. I think I mentioned them before already, so I'm not going to spend much time on this slide. Just quick look. So traffic, initial appearance, advice of rights, detention, hearings, bail reviews. This is being done right now. Preparation for trial. I think this is going to be done. If this continues, they will have to resort to that. As I told you, I had 2 trials scheduled, for very long trials, gang related, and the very serious cases with there were many defendants. On one of the cases, a few are going to trial, and the other one is only one. But anyway, they're very complicated, very involved trials that are set up for 8 weeks, 9 weeks. So there's a lot of preparation that has to go along that before the trial. And we just heard last week that the one in June is being postponed. But up until last week, we thought this trial is going on and we can't go visit the defendant. The attorneys, there's 2 attorneys, cannot go visit and prepare for the trial. So they were going to ask for a postponement, but we didn't know if it was going to be granted or how it was going to work. So my work has been canceled. The work of the attorneys has been canceled, but this has to be set up as soon as this is over, along with all the other things that were postponed. So if this continues a little longer, I think they're going to start thinking, well, let's start preparing for that trial, because once it gets open, if the trial gets set for June or July, for July, let's say it was set for June and it gets set for July, they would not have had any time to prepare. So I think May, June, people are going to think, okay, if we have a trial going on and it's not rescheduled, we need to do that preparation. So one of those cases, actually, Attorney started thinking about that, and what do we do? Well, so far we've done a couple of calls, conference calls, but of course that's not the same. Uh, we can interpret, we can figure out what's going on to resolve the urgent matters, the matters that have to do with the epidemic, and the matters with housing and things like that, or urgent things that can come up with the detainees. But the trial preparation requires meeting in person and privacy. But there are some things that can be discussed, and for the for witness preparation, also that can be done from a confidential platform separate, not from the jail, is different. But if it is meetings that have to do with a trial preparation, say of witnesses, it can easily be set up to do the interpretation remotely. So I suggest we can get ourselves prepared, and also suggest that to people that may want to use our services. Tell them, yes, we're ready. Yes, we can do it. Yes, it can be done. It's just a question of um, getting the platform and getting people accept the use of technology and adapt a little bit, but it can be done. So more examples of community interpretation that has been done for a while over the phone and continues being done. So this is nothing new. You can also do it on one of the uh, platforms for video conference, Zoom, team meeting, whatever platform, GoToMeeting, any platform that allows uh, for consecutive interpretation. So here we're talking about platforms now. So there's a platform for everything. Not all the platforms work for everything, and you're going to choose the platform, or the client is going to choose the platform. Most of the times it's going to be the client that chooses the platform, and we hope the client is equipped to use the platform. But if it's a client that has never used this and needs to use it because of the situation, then it'd be wise on our part to suggest, to say, yes, I can do it. I said to the court, and that's why I'm getting these hearings. And I think I'm the only interpreting that is doing this in my area, because I said, yes, I can do it. Yes, I'm familiar. I do GoToMeeting. Well, we're not using GoToMeeting. We have Microsoft Teams. Yes, I can do it. We use Zoom. Yes, I can do it. It's very easy to learn these platforms, and they're easily available. So just get familiarized with the platforms. All these platforms uh, are easily available, and most people can do this without much training, and in most cases free. If you want, you can pay for it and get meetings where more people can attend, but we don't have to do that. In my case, for example, for the court chose the platform. Great. But I told them I could do it, and I told them I have a platform, and then I was the one they called when they decided they had to do these hearings. Now, for simultaneous RSI, this is the newest thing, and I just started training with this. The one that's the most common, I'm not promoting any of this, just to let you know. It's just I'm getting to familiarize myself with this, and I just found out what's available to explore. So it's for you to explore and to decide. So the one that is the most popular these days, I believe, because I see it more often, is Kudo. Kudo is multilingual. You can go in both directions, and it's perfect for RSI, for remote simultaneous. And a lot of people like this. I have done some demonstrations. I attended as a participant, and I have done some practice. I am getting familiar with it, as I said, and so I'm passing this along. The other one is Voice Boxer, with which I also practiced recently. And so these work the same way as when you work in a booth, basically. And the last one, forgive me, I don't have the complete name, is DX something. I said I would look it up, and I didn't. But you can Google and find out for sure. So just put RSI, simultaneous interpretation platforms, or go into LinkedIn, and you're going to find this. Um, that's where I find most of the information, let me tell you. So, and I posted some there, so you may follow those links, and you will come to the same points I got. So Kudo Voice Boxer are the ones that I just learned, and I'm setting up a studio at home that is is based on the Kudo recommendation. So if you go to their site and if you take their demos, they advise how to set up a home studio and what you need. And so just follow those prompts and get set up. I still need one more cable because I need a cable connection uh, to a modem instead of Wi-Fi. They don't want Wi-Fi because this streaming is not so good, and so I have very good speeds, and I think I could do it, but still we need a more reliable um, network connection, and so they want a cable connection. So I ordered that. I also have an alternative supply of power. So in case the computer runs out of power, or there's a blackout or something, my computer will keep running. The meeting will not be interrupted. So that's a requirement if you want to work with them. Like I said, for you don't need this for consecutive, you don't need it for core. These are platforms that are specific for remote simultaneous, and the way they work is basically as if you were in a booth, except that the booth will be in your home, or it could be in a studio. Kudo has their own studios, but at this time they're not meeting in the studios. So if you want to set up like a studio, you have to have sort of like a booth environment in your home studio. So you need the two monitors, the headsets, and they recommend two headsets, good connection, the platform access and familiarity with the platform, and a monitor and a good computer. And say it works like in a booth. Really, the last conference I did, the booth is not even on the same floor as the speaker. The speaker is on one floor of a hotel, a meeting room is in another floor, and the interpreter's booth is on another floor in the corridor of a hotel. And so we get the feed from the floor on the monitor, and I'm working remote. Really, yes, I'm in the same hotel, but I'm nowhere near the speakers. So basically, it's the same thing. I'm receiving the feed, but instead of being on a different floor in the hotel or conference room, my studio is going to be in my home. The difference is that my teammate is not going to be next to me, but I still will have a teammate. So that's the adaptation. You are going to work in teams the same as you do on site, but on site, although you may be set up on a different floor, you have a booth where your partner is next to you. What is being done now through these platforms is partners are not in the same booth. So just like people on TV, they are all transmitting from their homes. The situation is not the same, but it's pretty close. So my teammate is going to be in her or his home studio, but we have communication via chat. So instead of passing a note or showing a note on my pad, I'm going to chat with my booth mate. We're going to pass the microphone, requesting the microphone. We're going to agree when we're going to pass it, or we can suggest for the teammate to take over the microphone, or as the passive interpreter, I can request the microphone as well. So there is a way to pass on the microphone. Uh, it's not the same as when you're next to the person, but it is very similar. It's just it requires a request and an acceptance, and then the transfer of the mic. So we're not going to be in the same booth, but we're working as booth mates. And this platform allows for the communication, like I said, via chat. There's also a chat where you can communicate with the technicians. So there's somebody in charge of the technical issues if you use one of these platforms for conference. And it's not you. You just would put something on the chat and they'll take care of that. And the beautiful thing is that there is a way to connect with the speaker too, and a function to ask the speaker to slow down, which is that's the one thing that I think is an improvement. Is something we don't often get to do, or we have to signal. But if we're in a booth somewhere else and far away and there's nobody to get to the speaker, there's no way to do it. Well, this way, the speaker is going to be looking at the screen, and on the screen, there's a function, a button that will give a signal requesting to slow down. So again, these all work very similar. Some of these go in one direction, some are multi-direction. They allow for many languages. So you can have an event where there's a booth for Spanish, a booth for English, a booth for French, a booth for Chinese. You can do relay interpreter. You can do exactly the same thing as you do in a booth in a conference. So these are specifically designed for simultaneous interpretation for events, for conference. So these are the first two. I did some, I took some training and participated in demos. This one, I have heard about it in the trainings. I did not have occasion to use it, and nor did I use this DX something else. I don't remember the full name. But just for you to do some research if you're interested, and for you to know that it is available, it is there, and I think it's here to stay, and we may as well get trained and get used to it so we can get to use it and get some work now and in the future, because I don't think this is going to disappear. Just now it's becoming more popular because of the need, but once the need is gone, I think it's going to stay. So now I've been talking for over an hour, almost an hour. Give me a second for a drink of water, And if you have questions, I will look at the chat. I will open it up for questions. You can text your questions via chat room, and I will read them and answer them out loud so everybody can hear. And of course, feedback is always welcome. Like I said in the beginning, the good and the bad feedback. The good one on the social media, thank you very much. The bad one, my mailbox, my email, and I appreciate that too because it helps me improve. I just ask you that you give me a chance to try to improve and to resolve it before you post on something negative, right? So thank you. I will look at the chat and start to answer the questions. Now give me a second while you pose the questions to get a little bit of a drink of water. Well, I see 17 questions, so hopefully I don't miss anyone. Let me go back to the beginning so I don't start by the last one and miss something. Okay, the first was yes, I can hear. How we can be certified interpreter? Well, it depends what you want to be certified in. If you want to be a court certified interpreter, I suggest you start with state court. And if you go to the judiciary, to the page in your state for the courts, so for example, in my state, you would go to Maryland Judiciary because I live in Maryland, and look at the courts in your state, and there should be a page called language access or interpreter program, which is related to language access. And within the interpreter program, you will find what the requirements are. If you meet the requirements, of course, you have to have two languages, very good command of two languages, and you have to train to interpret in consecutive, simultaneous, and sight translation, interpretation, and handle a whole lot of different topics. So you can train, and then you need to pass an exam to be certified. So all the requirements you would find in your state court. And I do some training for court interpreters, but I don't want to use the time to promote that. So you can look it up on my site or anybody else's site. So how long is the training for court interpreter? Well, that depends on the individual. There is no way I can tell you exactly how long everybody would take because it depends on the individual, it depends where you start, it depends how much time you dedicate to it. But the first thing is it depends on your command of the two languages. What platforms work better for RSI? Okay, like I said, I am getting trained in this as I am suggesting this to you. And I find this very interesting, and I'm starting to work on this. I have not worked professionally with the RSI platforms. I have participated in workshops and webinars and demonstrations on the two platforms I mentioned at the end, Kudo and VoiceBoxer. I know those are two platforms that people with experience in this recommend. Um, and I also heard Interactio is very good, but I have not had the chance to practice with that. And somebody says you are missing one of the best and more secure platforms, Blue Jeans. So thank you, Andres. I didn't know about that. I may have heard. I did not take note of that. Like I said, this is new to me too. Okay, Zoom is having issues with hacking and some courts are refusing to use it because of privacy issues. Yes, absolutely. Zoom is not the safest. So I'm using Zoom with friends, with church. It works. But yes, there are issues with hacking. I have not experienced that myself, but I would not use it for professional interpretation. I don't think you can do simultaneous with Zoom anyway. Um, and of course, there is a paid platform and a free one, and it depends what you use, and it depends on the settings. But yes, I don't think that would be the most reliable. And of course, when something is free, um, so yes, I do not suggest that for professional interpreting. I have used it as a participant in meetings, but like I said, not for interpreting. I know people use it for interpreting. I know they use it for consecutive interpretation. I know people are trying it, but yeah, my idea is that it's not the safest, and I don't think you can do RSI. Many courts and court reporter agencies use Polycom app. Okay, there are many. Like I said, I'm getting to be familiarized with as many as I can. The one that the court used in my case, I think it was uh, Teams from Microsoft. Um, but like I said, there are many, and I suggest try to learn as many as you can because it's the client that will set it up, most likely. Okay, Ronald. Okay, SIP-DX. Thank you, Elizabeth. That's the name of the last one that I did not remember the exact name. Thank you so much. Yes, that's it. So thanks for sharing that. SIP-DX, and I don't know if it's separate or together. Okay. This is Perla. I've been on with no sound. I just noticed an icon on the chat. Okay. Couple of questions. Thank you. Okay. So another question about certification. Do you have to be certified to be an interpreter? Well, it's advisable if you want to work to get certified, and yeah, to work in court, you have to be certified. I think in some cases, they allow people who are qualified rather than certified. In some languages, there is no certification. There are different ways of vetting interpreting qualifications in different settings and in different in courts, in state court. For some of the languages where there's no certification available, there are different categories but you have to be listed with the court, approved by the court, and you have to be vetted. So in some cases they call it language qualified or eligible. That means you have the you meet the basic requirements to sit for the exam, and they would allow you to work before certification in some settings and give you some time to prepare and get certified they if they can find certified interpreters. But you should be certified to work in court, in trials and hearings like that, or attain the level of proficiency that's required for your language if there is no certification. Which companies do depositions now? How do I get work on RSI platforms? Okay. Companies that do depositions, well, I can tell you, I suggest you look it up. I don't know who's doing it now. I know that I got some emails from Veritex that they are doing depositions, and they are doing virtual depositions. I have not done a virtual deposition yet. Would you charge per minute or per hour? Roughly how much? We can't talk about how much to charge. This depends on what you normally charge. And you charge according to your certifications and to the standards. I would not charge less than I charge on site. I do not charge per minute. I work per half day or full day. There are people that suggest working per hour. I cannot work per hour, but it's up to you. My suggestion is not to charge less. There is no reason to charge less than when you go in person. What is the best platform for I already mentioned that, and I'm not saying it's the best. It's the ones I know. I'm becoming familiar with this. I can't say one is better than the other. I can tell you that these are platforms that can be used for this and are available. And for what I experience, I know they work, but there's more than that. Well, thank you. Can you talk a bit about dealing with two litigants while doing the consecutive? Our court has decided to use Zoom. Well, I think it would work the same way as you would do it in person, except that you are going to be doing consecutive as when taking testimony of people. So for the courts, when I did these detention hearings, it was an adaptation for the judge and for the attorneys, because I normally do simultaneous and they want to present their arguments and go on and on and on. And they have to stop for me to consecutive because this platform does not allow for simultaneous. So they have to let me do consecutive, and I have to remind them at the beginning, we're going to do consecutive, you need to stop uh, for me to interpret. And oftentimes they continued, and then the judge said, well, allow the interpreter to interpret. And by then it was, half a page or a full page. I had taken notes, and it was hard. But so it is an adaptation, like I said, when you normally do simultaneous to move on to consecutive because of the platform. But if you're dealing with two litigants, and I suppose, for example, in a case of a domestic violence case or a divorce, you're going to hear one and then the other, and it's going to be question, interpretation, answer, interpretation, just like you would do in person, and they have to take turns. So whether it's one or two, they just need to take turns and to allow for the pause for consecutive, just like you would do with witnesses on the stand. So like I said, the difference is that now, if they don't have a platform for RSI, which the courts don't, then you have to do consecutive, where normally in person you would do simultaneous. So in the case of these detention hearings, where the attorneys are arguing to the judge for conditions of release, Normally, they would not pause at all for me, and I'm interpreting simultaneously, and I do the whole argument. But if we are using a virtual platform, which is not designed for RSI, which is what they have now, which is Teams or whatever platform, then instead of simultaneous, it has to be consecutive, and the adaptation for for me, I am used to doing consecutive too, but this kind of setting I would do simultaneous. I have to do consecutive and warn them it's going to be consecutive and please pause. Interpretify is another one. Thank you very much. Yes, I heard about Interpretify and I meant to put it here. I heard it works very well. And again, I don't have personal experience, but I heard from good trainers on the subject that that works very well. I don't have information about Total Language. Sorry, no, I don't. Which is the best interpretation platform in terms of value for the money? I'm sorry, I cannot answer that question either. And they will not give you a quote really. It's not like they're priced. These simultaneous interpretation platforms, they are not priced like GoToMeeting or the more common platforms that we use for web conferencing or Skype or whatever, where you have a free plan or a premium plan, and it's pretty much for everybody. This is exclusively for corporations and for uh, conference meetings. And so agencies will hire the interpreters and also will provide the platform or set up with a platform. Some of the platforms like Kudo, for example, they hire interpreters or they will give you a license for the use of the platform, and you can do it by meeting or by month or by subscription or by event. But they don't give a quote, they don't give a price, they price per event according to the setup, the number of participants, the booths, the rooms, etc., etc. So there are many factors. I don't have a price. I understand it's not cheap, but I would not be setting that up myself. I might suggest to somebody, well, listen, you want to do this remote, you can do it this way and contact these people, or I would contact them and organize it myself. But, I don't want to get involved in that. But that's a possibility. If you're a conference organizer, you can do that. As an interpreter, it's a lot to deal with, but you can request a quote for the event. So in that case, you would have to contact them directly, and they will give you a quote based on the event description, or if you want a subscription, which I don't think would pay for me to do. Because as soon as the court open, I would go back to working in court most of the time, almost full time, and I do some conferences occasionally, really. I don't do conference all the time. Court is my main thing. So I do some, but really not for me enough that I would want to set it up or have a subscription. Many courts in state court may install remote video or over the phone. Which tool may be popular in the US? Yes, many already have that set up. So I don't know if they all use the same, to be honest. But yes, I have done in state court many years ago, and now they are uh, in changing or improving the system, and they do sort of VRI. They are set up in some courthouses to do that for bail reviews, in particular. But now they are using it for other hearings as well. If the court is set up that they have a room prepared for that, a conference room where they can have the hearing, they would do it that way. Some they would do it over the phone, some they would be on video conference. Now, I have received calls from court where I interpreted over the phone through an agency, and some of the courthouses, I mean, sometimes the judge would tell me, well, I'm in New York, or I'm in California, or I'm here, um, and yes, I'm on video, and you can tell they are seeing the people, the participants, but I'm on the phone, and the other participants are on video, and I wasn't on video. I was, working over the phone. But that varies from state to state, and within the state too. I mean, in my state only, they don't have the system set up everywhere. They have a few, and I offered and I volunteered to do the OPI, and they say yes, yes, but so far all the requests are for on-site, and the only OPI they are doing is for bail reviews, like I said. Okay. And somebody posted a link here to Maryland Court. Okay. Yeah, Court State of Maryland MD.us/interpreter is one link you can follow to get to the program for court interpreting in the state of Maryland. But any state, I know people are calling from different states, would have something similar. There is National Center for State Courts, a consortium that the exam is the same everywhere in different states, and so the program is set up according to that. So just look up the name of your state judiciary or state court in your state, and you will find language access program, interpreter program, etc. Interactio is more for conference interpreter. Yes, Interactio is for conference interpreting. I put it this on the screen. You have the ones at the bottom from Kudo down. These are all for conference interpreting. These are for video conference, a consecutive interpretation. When I say video conference, it's just the most popular platforms that everybody uses nowadays, but this is not allowed for simultaneous. The ones for simultaneous for RSI are the ones at the bottom. Do you recommend any note-taking class? Where? Who do you recommend? I'm not a Spanish interpreter, so language neutral I prefer. Okay, I can't recommend any note-taking class. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, people have different methods to do note taking, and there's proponents of the of different methods, even shorthand, but most people find their own way, and there are people doing webinars or classes for note taking, but off the top of my head, I cannot recommend anybody. Please spell. I'm not sure what you want me to spell. Yes, you can do simultaneous with Zoom, says Graciela. All right, Graciela, thank you. I did not know that. For some reason, I haven't tried it, and I was discouraged from using it professionally because I heard of the issues with confidentiality and hacking. But I was under the impression that you couldn't do simultaneous. So you say you can? Thank you. This is new to me, so I will explore that. Thank you. Thank you for that. Blue jeans. Okay. Yes, somebody's asking for how you spell blue jeans as the name of the platform. This is something another participant mentioned as well, so it's in the chat. I think it's all together like blue jeans. from what I read before, but I didn't know that one. Let me go back and look in the chat. Or ask the, I lost that. If somebody can type it for me again, I appreciate the person that suggested that. Okay. We'll get to you. I'll get it and I will spell it as soon as, I think it's blue jeans, like all together, like the blue jeans you wear. I'm sorry, this should not happen when you're doing simultaneous. That's my land phone.
I just sent you the website. It's blue jeans, like in bluejeans.com.
Okay, thank you so much. I will get to that. I'm scrolling up and down on my chat. Hope I don't miss anybody. Okay, before I get to the end, and I don't want to miss anybody, somebody's asking, are we talking about home booths? I was looking at my closet and creating in my head quiet space for work. Yes, that's a good idea, and I've seen somebody doing that, actually using like a walk-in closet, like for privacy. For me, it'd be a little claustrophobic, but yeah, you need a quiet place, soundproof if possible. Put a soundproof barrier of some kind. That's also recommended. And yeah, try to recreate a booth in your home, in some space in your home.
Victoria,
That's the idea. Yes. Yes.
Victoria just received an email with everybody's emails. I think it's very dangerous to send all that.
I am so sorry. I didn't mean to do that. The first one that I sent, I put in blind copy, and then because I made a mistake with the time, I pasted on the calendar, and the calendar send the email to everybody, and everybody's addresses are visible. I normally don't do that. I thank you for that, and I apologize for it. I did not mean to do it. It's just when I put the invitation in the calendar, Google just sent, put it visible, and I did not realize that. I was just trying to correct the mistake that I did with the time and trying to do it the fastest way possible, but it's my mistake. I will not do that again. And thank you.
I really appreciate your help.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, Victoria.
Yes.
Hi. A quick question about practically finding work through RSI platforms. Who hires interpreters, the platforms themselves or agencies through platforms?
Okay, both. The answer is both do. I found the blue jeans. I'm going to put it. Both. For example, if you look up on LinkedIn, I don't know if you're in LinkedIn. I am in LinkedIn, and I just put, I became certified in Kudo, and so there's links to Kudo, there's links to others. That's how I found out. So, for example, not that I'm pitching this, but it's just I'm sorry, I'm trying to copy the blue jeans here. Kudo is one that would do both. They organize events. They are the platform themselves. They organize events. They hire interpreters, or an agency contracts with Kudo for the platform and gets their own interpreters, or you as the interpreter recommend the platform and they would hire you if you bring your client, of course, so it works different ways. So there are agencies that work with Kudo or work with VoiceBoxer or Interprefy or Interaction. There are agencies that work with 2 or 3 of them, and they would, based on the situation or the pricing, or I don't know how they pick. and they would hire the interpreters, just like when they hire you for a conference and there's an agency or organizer that would, take care of getting the equipment and the technicians and maybe the space, or maybe it's the company that hires the interpreter agency, and the interpreter agency would hire the interpreters and get the equipment. So think of it as the same way as you think of the equipment. You're going to interpret for a conference, you need the booth, the setup, the monitors. Do you bring your booth? Well, if you're an organizer, you would. If you not, you're hired by the agency or directly by a client that organizes events. And so they would have to contract with the platform.
Thank you.
They
And
would get the equipment. But all sorts of setups work these days. So I understand all of them would, I don't know if everybody hires directly, but for sure Kudo would hire interpreters, and they put an ad that they are hiring, and that's how I got, involved initially. So they do demonstrations, they do free demos. You take the demo, then you take a little quiz, then you do, then they tell you how to set up a home studio if you want to be available for them to hire you. But also there are trainers that work with Kudo and organize events with Kudo or VoiceBoxer. So I did another training with VoiceBoxer, and the agency and the trainers work with both, for example. So that's why I'm familiar with these two. I'm just becoming familiar with them. And they mentioned Interpretify and Interaction DX. I hadn't heard about Blue Jeans, or maybe I did and I did not write it down. But so, like I said, there are many platforms, and you just have to check with each platform and with the agencies that you normally work with, or agencies that work with remote interpretation. You have to find them, I guess.
And
Okay,
could you suggest any agencies that work with remote interpretation platforms?
No, I cannot.
Thank
Like
you.
I said, I have not been hired yet to do remote interpretation with the platforms. I have done the training.
Thank you very much.
I'm hoping to get hired, to be honest, but so far I haven't done the remote interpretation on platforms like this professionally. So I'm getting set up with my home studio to be able to do it. And like I said, I'm waiting for that cable to be able to connect directly rather than Wi-Fi to the modem. So that's the one thing that I'm lacking at the moment. My studio is sort of set up, and I put a picture. So I have the alternative UPS power supply, universal power supply unit, and so there's no power outages, and my equipment is protected. There's the monitor, there's my computer, the monitor, two headsets. What else? Soundproofing, which I need to work a little bit more on that. You tell me how the sound was today. That will help me, give me an idea, because today is particularly windy where I'm from, and I was hoping to try to see if my setup with the soundproofing that I did and being more away from the window. I like to work by the window, but I moved my office setup away from the window and close to the closet to get better setup as far as the sound. So I appreciate your feedback on that. So I'm setting up to be able to do it professionally. So far, I've done demos and I've taken the training. And apologize, I don't have any more experience than that. So I offer to pass on what I know and for free. But I am still learning it.
Thank you.
Hoping to be hired to do that professionally. Like I said, I have done on-site professionally or remotely from another floor, like I said. So I think it's not much different, and I find it doable, accessible. So I'm setting up the conditions to be able to do it.
Victoria, I have one question before you close your session, and thank you very much for the wonderful information that you've provided. My name is Jack, and we work in the state court in Florida, and what we're interested in, the judges and the court administration have chosen to use Zoom. And I noticed that Graciela provided information on working simultaneous with Zoom, and I'm really interested in knowing about that. If she can either contact me or if you can unmute her and she can provide how that works. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I would be interested in that too. So thank you very much. I was going to ask her to send me some information via email or something, and I was going to look it up because this is the first news I have that you could do simultaneous with Zoom. I did not even try it when I was discouraged to use it because of the hacking issue. But you're right. It's the most popular and it's free. And if the courts are starting to use it, like you said in Florida, so we should be prepared for that. So I appreciate, and Tanya just posted here the link, and I'm going to post it here too, and I can email it to you later. Can you all see the chat where the link is?
No.
Tanya just posted.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
can you hear me?
I can hear you.
This is Graciela Horn. The Zoom, the simultaneous interpreting in Zoom is a very new service. They just started, but they're set up. They're set up for multiple languages, but everybody's trying it. It's just very new.
So it's
if you try, yes, if you go into Google, they're not tutorials. There's only one person, an interpreter, that offer a basic tutorial of how to use it, but it's very basic.
Thank you very much. I will look it up, and I just put it up on my screen, the link that Tanya sent. And Graciela, thank you for that information, and I will explore that further.
Very welcome.
I did not know. And yeah, it's worth exploring. And as I said, we have to be familiar with different platforms because we're not choosing the platform most of the time. Like I think Rosila just said, or somebody said that in the courts in Florida, they're using Zoom. And well, if that's what they're using, that's what we have to use. So we have to, although initially I sort of discarded because I thought it was not adequate for this. Now that I know that in Florida they're using it for court, and that some of these they can be used for simultaneous, although it's new, I bet they're going to improve it. And I don't know, I suppose it would be a paid platform, but it may be worth to pay a little bit more to get a more reliable platform. Yes, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Maryland is not going to be using Zoom for the courts, I heard today, because it's not a secure connection.
Yes, that was my understanding as well, and that's why I just did not even look into it. But now that I hear differently from other areas, other people, and remember, if we're working remote, we don't have to stay in one. You can work with courts in other states. You can work with clients in other states, in other countries, like you do for OPI. So if the service is available and you can do it, you don't have to limit yourself to your jurisdiction. So if other jurisdictions allow you to work, or if you're certified to work in other jurisdictions, like I am because I'm federal, so I have traveled to New York for trials. I have traveled to Connecticut. I have Virginia, wherever. So if the courts use it and it's in another jurisdiction, but you are able to do it, may as well get familiarized with it. So this is useful information for me. As I said, I was not, okay, someone says it's not Florida, it's somewhere else. Well, thank you for that too. It doesn't matter where. The point I'm trying to make is that wherever it is, if you can work remote, you can work from anywhere. So you can be hired by anywhere, anybody, anywhere in the world, and deliver your service remotely if you are equipped to do it. And my suggestion is to get familiarized with as many platforms as you can, to be prepared to accept the work. So that's very useful. Thank you so much. So yeah, somebody said Pennsylvania is also beginning to use Zoom. Yes, I suppose more people are going to try to use Zoom because it's popular and it's free, like I said, and in spite of the issues with hacking, I suppose there may be ways to try to avoid that or set up a secure connection. Probably not the free one. But yeah, I initially discarded, like I said, because of that, but now I'm taking it a second look because of what I heard today here. So thank you for that. I appreciate that because that's what I want to do. I want to be prepared for when I have to do it and not find out when I am assigned to do it. I want to be prepared and say, yes, I can do it. Yes, you can assign me this job. Yes, I can take it. Okay. I can't say yes, whatever, and then, oh, it doesn't work. Oh, I didn't know it wouldn't work. I could not take a job like that. So the interpreter option was only available with paid option in Zoom. Okay, that's what I figured. So here is another contribution. So the interpreter option is only available with the paid option in Zoom. So that's great. So, there are different settings. As with all these platforms, you can participate as a participant or you can participate as an interpreter. The platform works differently and you have different levels of access. So if Zoom becomes more, because it has the name and it's available, if they develop this further, the simultaneous, like someone says, they're just starting, well, it's worth exploring. So thank you so much. So I got another question here. Thank you for doing this. You're welcome. Do you know how to become an interpreter with Interprefy? No, I haven't tried that one yet, but I will try to find that out too. And I would suggest go to their site and find out what they offer, what they require, if they hire, just like I did with this first two. Okay, so I think that was the last question. I hope I answered all. You can send me an email if I missed something or if something else that you wanted to contribute. And I'll try to answer to everybody.
Do we get the CEUs?
No, I'm sorry. I did not get this approved for CEUs. This is something I came up with last week. And in order to get approval for CEUs, I have to submit and wait. And I did not do the whole process for that. The other courses that I do have been approved for a long time, but it's a process to get those approved. So I could not do this in time for this. So
I would like to thank you very much for this course. It was really, really good. Thank you very much.
thank you very much. I appreciate your participation and your feedback. And if you have any more feedback, I'd be happy to take it. As I said, happy to take it via email. You have my email. So thank you so much. And I'm also on LinkedIn. I'm trying to start to use Twitter, but I'm not really good at that. I don't post anything. So LinkedIn is where I'm most of the time, and I should work on Facebook, but so far I have it for personal use.
Try to use WhatsApp. It's very much used
I
in
use
different.
I use that but for personal use. Yeah, I have not used it for other. But thank
You
you.
can create a group for your interpreters courses or your people, and that's really good to communicate to everybody.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much. I didn't think of that.
Thank you.
So
Thank
thank you
you.
all for participating and for all your contributions. I will do this again next week. If you know somebody that was interested or is interested and didn't get to do it today, look on my page. It's going to be next Friday, same time. Thank you so much. Have a good day, everybody, and stay safe.